Hi, I'm Dana, and I'm a lead animal care specialist here at the Brookfield Zoo. I'm here today to celebrate Wolf Awareness Week with you with our pack of Mexican gray wolves behind us, Ela and Apache. We have two groups of wolves here at the Brookfield Zoo. We have a lone wolf, and like I mentioned, this is Apache here. He is a 9.5-year-old wolf that came to us from New Mexico, and we have his breeding partner, Ela, who was actually born here in 2016. Mexican gray wolves are the most genetically distinct population of gray wolves in North America and one of the rarest mammals in the world. They can currently be found in the southwest United States and northwest of Mexico. The average group or pack size averages from 2 to 10 individuals, but can go all the way up to 20. The pack is made up of the alpha male and the alpha female, who are the breeding pair, the yearlings from last year's litter, and this year's new pups. Most non-breeding or subordinate members of the pack leave their natal pack around 1 to 2 years of age to form new packs. Wolves have a large repertoire of ways to communicate with each other. The most recognizable is the howl, which is used to bring the pack together before and after a kill, upon waking, or when announcing their presence to other wolves. They also have a wide variety of facial expressions and body postures that they use to display dominance or submission, courtship, threats, and greeting ceremonies with lots of licking. The Mexican gray wolf was listed as an endangered species by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 1976. Between 1977 and 1980, the United States and Mexico gathered the few wolves that were left in the wild and established a binational captive breeding program. Can you believe that these wolves were considered extinct in the wild until 1998? Through the organized breeding effort of zoos in the United States and Mexico, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service-led recovery program was able to reintroduce 11 wolves into their historic range. Since then, the population has grown both through breeding of wild pairs, release efforts, and more recently through fostering. In the mid-2010s, with just over 100 animals in the wild, the Mexican wolf interagency field team began looking for new ways to increase numbers in the wild while improving genetic diversity. They learned of the success of a technique called cross-fostering from the Red Wolf Recovery Program. This is when you take puppies from zoo-born litters and place them in dens of wolves with puppies of the same age. In 2014, the Mexican Wolf Recovery Program attempted their first cross-fostering from wild pack to wild pack. 2 of 6 puppies from a litter born to Ernesta, a wolf who had previously lived here at the Brookfield Zoo prior to her being released to the wild, were added to the wild pack. The fostering was a success, and biologists learned a lot. The following year, an attempt was made to place zoo-born puppies into a wild den. Unfortunately, the den could not be located, so they were returned to their mother. In 2016, they made history by successfully placing 2 puppies from the Endangered Wolf Center in Missouri in a den in the wild. A few days after this historic event, a litter was born here. A few days later, 2 of the puppies were on their way to Arizona to join the Elkhorn pack. The following year, 2 more Brookfield Zoo-born puppies were cross-fostered into a pack in New Mexico. Since the first efforts to cross-foster captive to wild puppies, 50 puppies have been fostered into the wild. 2020 was set to be a big year for the recovery program. The pandemic unfortunately hit right before the start of breeding season, so there was a lot of uncertainty as to whether cross-fostering would be possible. Thanks to the efforts of many, 20 puppies made it into the wild this year, a new record. There are currently only 163 Mexican gray wolves in the wild today, but the efforts being made between the United States and Mexico with the use of managed populations brings hope to the long-term survival of Mexican wolves in the wild.
All right. That's amazing. I didn't know we had, but the Mexican Gray Wolf Recovery Program had 20 pups this year.
I know, isn't that amazing?
That's really good.
I know.
So who is this right here?
This is Apache. He is our alpha male, and he is 9.5 years old.
Do you know how much he weighs?
Mexican gray wolves in general weigh between 50 and 80 pounds. Offhand, I don't know exactly how much he weighs. I'd guess around 65, just looking at him.
And Ela is our other wolf. She's running around way back there.
Yeah.
She's a lot smaller than Apache.
She is. That's pretty common in wolves.
Okay.
The females are generally a little bit smaller, so she's probably closer to the 55 pound range.
Mm-hmm. So how can you tell these two apart if you only see one wolf here, because they're easy to tell apart when they're both together, but if you only see one,
the lighter of the wolves is Apache, and Ella is darker. She has a really dark kind of mask on her face. She's also very fluffy. Like, he looks more I mean, he has a winter coat now, so he's a little fluffier than normal, but in general is more fluffy.
Mm-hmm. And what are they eating today?
Today they have bison rib bones, and it looks like beef bones. So one of the important things to know about the Mexican gray wolf in managed populations is they're treated a lot differently than most of the other animals we keep care for at the zoo, because they are part of a possible release program or possible fostering program. We have to treat them very wild, so we don't do the normal husbandry that we would do with the other animals under our care, where we would want them to recognize their names, participate in training. We can't do any of that with Mexican gray wolves because we want them to be as wild as possible. Should they get the opportunity to have puppies in the wild or puppies brought in and cared for here, they need to have all the characteristics of a wild wolf so that they aren't approaching people and all of those things.
And do adult wolves ever get re-released? Or get released, not re-released?
So they have in the past, and actually when I worked on this team when the Mexican gray wolves first came to Brookfield Zoo, that was the purpose of the recovery program, was to release adult animals into the wild. Like I mentioned earlier, the efforts now are more focused on cross-fostering of puppies because it's a faster way and a quicker way to get animals into the wild, as well as increasing genetic diversity.
Mm-hmm. So where do we source all of the bones that they're eating now? Where do we get those?
So we have Zoo Nutrition Services on staff with a director of nutrition in charge of that. So she takes care to make sure we get good food for all the animals, but for the wolves and the social carnivores in particular, it's very important for them to have food that they can share, because it allows them to really enforce those
hierarchy.
Yes, thank you, Lynette.
Yeah, sure, anytime. That's what I'm here for. So what's their typical range?
Where they live?
Yeah, in the wild.
So these are Mexican gray wolves, so they're found in the northwest of Mexico, as well as the southwest United States, so Arizona and New Mexico.
Mm-hmm. When's the best time of day to see them?
That all kind of depends. I think the keepers normally do a lot of their servicing in the afternoon around 2, and that might be a time when they might be up and active. Now that it's getting cooler, they're going to be active a lot more than they are in the summer. So it just depends on really when keepers come out and provide any of their food, or when they would normally be active, which would be more like dawn and dusk.
Mm-hmm. So I know you said we don't do any kind of husbandry training or anything like that, but we don't just leave them to their own devices, correct? They do get vaccinations and things like that?
Correct. But when we are doing things like that, when we have to give vaccinations in particular, we're a lot more hands-on with the wolves than we would be with other animals. So with like a rhino, say, if they're going to get a vaccination, we train them to accept the vaccination without being under anesthesia. They'll just be standing there, and we've trained them to accept that. With the wolves, again, to reinforce that we don't want them approaching humans, we do more handling with them. So they're not trained. We have to go in and actually handle the wolves in order to give them their vaccinations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you normally work with the pachyderms.
Correct.
What would you say is the biggest difference between a pachyderm Like, let's be specific and say a rhino
Okay.
and a wolf.
One is the size. Rhinos are a lot bigger. Technically, they are both considered dangerous animals here at the zoo. But I will say, to kind of debunk some wolf myths while we're at it, when we have to go in and do any of the handling with the wolves, these wolves do not approach us. They are actually very scared of us. And I think there's a common misconception that wolves are, kind of out trying to find you and hunt you, and that is definitely not the case. So the other big difference is that we can actually interact with the rhinos to, again, help with a lot of those husbandry behaviors. So there's just kind of a different relationship when you get to work with an animal that's kind of long-term and managed care versus the really exciting recovery program animals like the Mexican gray wolf.
So one of our questions is how guests sometimes have a hard time seeing them just because they've got so many little spots around
good for the wolves.
The habitat. Yeah. So do staff kind of know where they hang out, or do they ever have trouble
it depends, but these two wolves in particular do spend a lot of time up on their big hill in the center of the exhibit. It's just a matter of them laying down and being able to kind of spot them while they're not really moving. And you kind of spoke to the fact that they can be a little bit difficult to find, but as part of the kind of agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services to hold these animals, which is what we are doing, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service owns them and governs everything we do with them. We have to have a certain amount of space where they can kind of get away from the public and kind of not be seen. So while not great for our visitors coming to see them, it is in the wolf's best interest. Well, I want to thank everybody very much for joining us today and celebrating Wolf Awareness Week here at Brookfield Zoo. Have a great day.